Welcome, History Buffs, to another episode of the WOW History Channel. Horses were an incredibly important part of the Civil War. They were the primary means for transporting men and material to the battlefields, and in many cases, they participated in the battles and gave their lives as mounts for the cavalry. My name is Ron Guth, and this week I'm going to show you some actual horse-related photographs from the Civil War. If you enjoy videos like this, please hit the subscribe button so that you can receive notifications every time I post a new video. The images I'm going to show you here today are from a 1911 book titled The Photographic History of the Civil War in 10 volumes. It was published by the Reviews Company of New York on the 50th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. The first picture is of an American volunteer cavalryman from October 1862, a month after the Battle of Antietam. Here the soldier represents the command, "Stand to horse," and I'll read the caption for the picture. The war was only in its second year, but his drill is quite according to Army regulations. Hand to bridle, 6 inches from the bit. His steady glance as he peers from beneath his hat in the sunlight tells its own story. Days and nights in the saddle without food or sleep, sometimes riding along the 60-mile picket line in front of the Army of the Potomac, sometimes faced by sudden encounters with the Southern raiders, have all taught him the needed confidence in himself, his horse, and his equipment. The second picture shows the cavalry stables at Giesboro, D.C., and is titled "The Stables for 6,000 Horses." Hundreds of thousands of horses were needed and used during the Civil War, and this was just one place where they were stabled on the Union side. Giesboro is just south of Washington, D.C., on the east side of the Potomac River. The third picture was also taken at Giesboro, and it shows the tents of the officers in charge of those stables. It is titled "Giesboro, One of the Busiest Spots of the War." The caption reads, "The Cavalry Depot at Giesboro, D.C., established in July 1863, was the place where remounts were furnished to the cavalry and artillery of the Army of the Potomac during the last 2 years of the war. The tents in the lower photograph are those of the officers in charge of that immense establishment where they received and issued thousands of horses. Convalescents who had lost their mounts, with men to be remounted, were drawn upon to help take care of the horses until their departure for the front. This photograph was taken in May 1864, when Grant and Lee were grappling in the wilderness and at Spotsylvania, only 70 miles distant. The inspection of horses for remounting was made by experienced cavalry officers, while the purchasing was under the quartermaster's department. The fourth picture shows the Farriers of the Federal Cavalry in August 1863. According to the caption, every company of cavalry had its own farrier, enlisted as such. These men not only had to know all about the shoeing of horses, but also had to be skilled veterinary surgeons, such as each regiment has at the present day, coming next in pay to a second lieutenant. Plainly visible are the small portable anvil on an overturned bucket and the business-like leather aprons of the men. An army, quote, "marches upon its stomach," end quote, but cavalry marches upon its horse's feet, which must be cared for. The fifth picture is titled "Men Who Shod a Million Horses," and shows a small army of men standing in front of a large building with a sign that reads, "Government Horse Shoeing Shop." Here the caption reads, "This photograph presents another aspect of the gigantic system whereby the Union cavalry became organized and equipped so as to prove irresistible after 1863. In the fiscal year 1864, the Union government bought and captured nearly 210,000 horses. The Army in the field required about 500 new horses every day. Sheridan's force alone required 150 new horses a day during the Shenandoah campaign. At Giesboro, the big remount depot near Washington, they handled 170,622 horses in 1864, and in June 1866, they only had 32 left. This was exclusive of 12,000 or 13,000 artillery horses handled at the same depot. All these animals had to be shod. This photograph shows some of the men who did it with the implements of their trade. The army in the field kept this army at home busy supplying its manifold needs. The Southerners, on the other hand, their only array of men was at the front. At home, they had only an army of women who were knitting, weaving, and sewing for the ragged soldiers in the field. The men wholesale had left their businesses and enlisted. The sixth picture is titled "The Hay Business of the Government" and shows a large group of men standing atop a pile of hay bales. This picture was taken in 1864. The caption reads, "The matter of proper feed for cavalry horses was a constant perplexity to the federal government until the men had learned how to care for their mounts. During the first 2 years of the war, 284,000 horses were furnished to the cavalry, although the maximum number of cavalrymen in the field at any time during this period did not exceed 60,000. The enormous number of casualties among the horses was due to many causes, among which were poor horsemanship on the part of the raw troopers mustered in at the beginning of the war, and the ignorance and gross inefficiency on the part of many officers and men as to the condition of the horses' backs and feet, care as to food and cleanliness, and the proper treatment of the many diseases to which horses on active service are subject. In such a tremendous machine as the Quartermaster's Department of the Army of the Potomac, containing at the beginning of the war many officers with absolutely no experience as quartermasters, there were necessarily many vexations and delays in purchasing and forwarding supplies, and many disappointments in the quality of supplies, furnished too often by scheming contractors. By the time the photograph above was taken in 1864, the business of transporting hay to the army in the field had been thoroughly systematized, as the swarming laborers in the picture attest. The last picture is titled "A Well-Equipped Horse of the 1st Massachusetts Cavalry, 1864, and shows Captain E.A. Flint and his horse. The caption reads, "The saddlebags and hooded stirrup of Captain E.A. Flint's horse shown in this photograph are, quote, regulation," end quote, but the outfit of a regular cavalry horse did not call for a breast strap. It was more apt to be used among the volunteers. The regulars, as a rule, preferred a single rein, curb bit, and no breast strap or martingale. No breast straps were issued, but they were found useful when cavalry was pounding up a slope, leaping fences, walls, and ditches, and otherwise putting unusual strain on the belly band. The hooded stirrup was useful both to keep out rain and to keep the foot warm in winter. The saddle and blanket equipment in the photograph also conform to regulations. This is one of the horses and men that charged Stuart's cavalry so fiercely on the night of the 3rd day at Gettysburg. The 1st Massachusetts was in the 2nd Division under General David Gregg. The photograph was taken in November 1864 at the headquarters of the Army of the Potomac, then thoroughly in touch with its ample, quote, supply trains, end quote. Now you know a little bit more about horses in the Civil War. In the coming weeks, I'll be presenting more videos with Civil War photographs that hopefully will teach you new things about that old war. Thanks for coming along for the ride and for your support. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.